The stagecoach rattled into Casa Grande, Arizona territory, on a sweltering afternoon in August of 1878, carrying Natalie Dawson and the weight of debts she could never repay, debts that promised to destroy what little remained of her shattered life before she even had a chance to begin anew. Natalie pressed her face against the dusty window, watching the settlement materialize through waves of heat rising from the desert floor. Casa Grande was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of adobe buildings and weathered wooden structures clustered along a single main street. The Gila River Valley stretched beyond, offering precious water in this harsh landscape. She clutched her worn carpetbag tighter, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety twist in her stomach. Inside that bag lay everything she owned in this world, along with the letters that had brought her here, letters from her late uncle promising employment and a fresh start. Those promises had died with him 3 weeks before her arrival. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the depot, and Natalie climbed down on shaking legs. Dust coated her navy traveling dress, the one she had carefully mended twice already. She was 22 years old, alone, and now stranded in a frontier town with exactly $7 to her name. The telegram she had received in Tucson had been brief and devastating. Her uncle Samuel had been killed in a mining accident. His boarding house, which she was meant to help manage, had been sold to cover his considerable debts. She stood in the blazing sun, unsure where to even begin. Other passengers collected their belongings and dispersed, greeting family or heading toward the saloons and hotels. Natalie remained frozen until the driver tossed down her small trunk. "This is all, miss?" he asked, not unkindly. "Yes, thank you." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The driver tipped his hat and climbed back up. Within minutes, the stagecoach rumbled away, leaving Natalie alone on the dusty street. She picked up her trunk with both hands, her carpetbag hooked over one elbow, and started walking. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. She had no destination in mind, only the desperate need to find shade and figure out what to do next. The general store seemed like a reasonable place to start. A kindly-looking woman behind the counter looked up as Natalie entered, a small bell chiming above the door. "Afternoon," the woman said, studying Natalie with open curiosity. "You just arrived on the stage." "Yes, madam. I'm Natalie Dawson. I was supposed to meet my uncle, Samuel Dawson, but I understand he passed recently." The woman's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "Oh, dear child." "Yes, Samuel died nearly a month ago now. Such a tragedy. We all liked him very much. I'm Martha Cunningham. My husband and I run this store." "I appreciate your kindness. I wonder if you might know where I could find affordable lodging. I need to figure out my next steps." Martha hesitated, her weathered hands fidgeting with her apron. "Well, there's Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, but she charges $2 a week, meals included. There's also rooms above the Lucky Horse Saloon, but those aren't suitable for a respectable young woman." $2 a week would drain Natalie's meager funds in less than a month. She swallowed hard. "Is there any work available in town? I can cook, clean, keep accounts. I have good penmanship and I'm a hard worker." "Times are difficult," Martha said gently. "Most families do their own work. You might try the restaurant or the hotel, but I know they're not hiring currently. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful." Natalie thanked her and left, her heart sinking lower with each step. She made her way to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, a neat adobe structure with a shaded porch. The proprietor, a stern woman in her 50s, showed her a small but clean room. $2 weekly, paid in advance. 3 meals a day, laundry once a week. No men visitors, no drinking, no loud noise. Natalie counted out the coins, watching her safety net shrink to $5. She had 1 week to find employment or figure out another solution. The room was simple, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small dresser. She unpacked her few belongings and sat on the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of her situation. She had come west from St. Louis after her parents died of influenza the previous winter. Her father had been a clerk, and they had lived modestly but comfortably. After their deaths, Natalie discovered that medical bills had consumed their savings. She sold what little remained to pay the debts and buy her stagecoach ticket west, counting on her uncle's generosity for a new beginning. Now that hope had evaporated like water on desert stones. The next 3 days, Natalie walked the length of Casa Grande repeatedly, inquiring about work at every establishment. The hotel did not need help. The restaurant owner said business was too slow to hire. The saloons offered work she would not accept. The schoolteacher position was filled. Even the laundry already had sufficient staff. Each rejection chipped away at her composure. On the 4th day, desperate and down to her last few dollars, Natalie encountered a well-dressed man outside the Mercantile. He introduced himself as Victor Latimer, owner of the Lucky Horse Saloon and several other properties in town. "I hear you're looking for work, Miss Dawson," he said smoothly, his dark eyes assessing her in a way that made her uncomfortable. "Yes, sir. Respectable work. Of course. I own a restaurant in need of a hostess. Someone refined to greet customers, manage seating, keep the place looking nice. You'd be perfect. Room and board included plus a small salary." It sounded too good to be true, and Natalie's instincts screamed caution. "Which restaurant?" "The Golden Mesa, just down the street." Natalie had walked past it several times. It seemed legitimate, though she had noticed it shared a wall with the Lucky Horse. "I'd like to think about it." "Don't think too long. Opportunity doesn't wait forever in places like this." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Natalie with an uneasy feeling she could not shake. That evening, she confided her concerns to Martha Cunningham, who had shown her consistent kindness. Martha's face darkened. "Stay away from anything Latimer offers. That man is a snake. The Golden Mesa is just a front. Girls who work there end up working in the saloon before long. He lures them in with promises, then traps them with debts they can never repay. You'd be wise to avoid him entirely." "But what am I going to do?" Natalie's voice broke. "I've tried everywhere. I have 3 days left before my room payment is due, and I don't have the money." Martha squeezed her hand. "Something will turn up. Have faith." But faith did not pay for food or shelter. The next morning, Natalie woke to find a note slipped under her door. It was from Mrs. Henderson, reminding her that payment was due in 2 days. The words were polite but firm. No payment meant eviction. Natalie dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been her Sunday best. She pinned her dark blonde hair into a neat bun and set out once more. Perhaps she had missed something. Perhaps someone had changed their mind. The sun climbed higher as she walked, the heat oppressive. She was passing the stable when she heard raised voices. A group of men stood in the shade of the building, arguing. Natalie tried to walk by unnoticed, but one of the men grabbed her arm. "You're Dawson's niece, aren't you?" Startled, Natalie pulled back. "Yes, please let go of me." The man, rough-looking with several days of beard growth, did not release her. "Your uncle owed me money, $35. I loaned it to him for his boarding house repairs. Now that he's dead, the debt passes to family. That's you." "I don't have $35. I barely have anything at all." Another man stepped forward. "Sam Dawson owed me $20 for supplies." A third man joined in. "He owed me $15 for carpenter work." Natalie's vision swam. $70, it might as well have been $7,000. "I don't have it. I didn't even know about these debts." "Don't matter if you knew," the first man said. "Your blood. You pay, or we'll take what you got and sell you to Latimer. He's always looking for girls, and you're pretty enough." Terror shot through her. "You cannot do that. That's illegal. Laws here are flexible, girl. Judge is a friend of ours. You've got until tomorrow to come up with the money, or we'll collect one way or another." He finally released her arm, and Natalie stumbled backward. The men laughed as she fled, her heart pounding. She made it back to the boarding house and locked herself in her room, shaking uncontrollably. $70 plus the $2 she owed Mrs. Henderson. $72 total. An impossible sum. She had nowhere to turn. No family, no friends, no resources. The walls seemed to close in around her. For the first time since her parents died, Natalie allowed herself to cry deep sobs that shook her entire body. When the tears finally stopped, she felt hollow and exhausted. A knock at her door made her jump. "Miss Dawson, it's Martha Cunningham. May I come in?" Natalie opened the door, trying to compose herself, but Martha saw through it immediately. The older woman embraced her, and Natalie found herself explaining everything: the debts, the threats, the impossible situation. Martha listened with a grave expression. "Those men are vultures. They probably inflated the amount Sam actually owed, knowing you'd have no way to verify. But they're also dangerous. They work for some of the rougher elements in town." She paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "There might be someone who could help, though I'm not sure he will." "Anyone?" "I'll try anyone. There's a rancher named Killian Quade. He owns the largest spread in the valley, the Running Q. He's known as a fair man but very private, keeps to himself mostly. He comes to town maybe once a month for supplies. But he has money and he has influence. If you could convince him to help, those men wouldn't dare cross him." "Why would he help a stranger?" Martha smiled sadly. "I don't know that he would, but it's the only option I can think of. He's supposed to be in town tomorrow afternoon. You could try speaking with him." It was a slim hope, but it was hope nonetheless. Natalie thanked Martha and spent a sleepless night rehearsing what she might say to this mysterious rancher. She had nothing to offer, no collateral, no guarantee of repayment. She would be throwing herself on the mercy of a stranger. Pride warred with desperation, and desperation won. The next afternoon, Natalie stationed herself near the general store, watching for Martha's signal. When the older woman gestured from the doorway, Natalie's stomach lurched. A man had just tied his horse to the rail outside. A magnificent buckskin gelding that spoke of quality and care. Killian Quade was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build earned from hard ranch work. He wore dusty range clothes, dark pants and a chambray shirt, with a well-worn hat pulled low. As he turned, Natalie caught her first clear view of his face. He was perhaps 30 years old, with strong features, sun-bronzed skin, and striking pale blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. A day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. He moved with the confident grace of a man completely comfortable in his own skin. Natalie's courage nearly failed. This man looked like he had no patience for sob stories or desperate pleas, but the memory of those threatening men pushed her forward. She intercepted him at the store entrance. "Mr. Quade, sir, might I have a moment of your time?" Those pale eyes settled on her, assessing. "Do I know you?" "No, sir. My name is Natalie Dawson. I've recently arrived in Casa Grande and I find myself in difficult circumstances. I was hoping you might be willing to hear me out." He studied her for a long moment. Natalie forced herself to meet his gaze, though something about the intensity of those eyes made her heart race. Finally, he gestured to the bench outside the store. 5 minutes. They sat, and Natalie explained as concisely as possible. Her uncle's death, the unexpected debts, the threats from the men, her complete lack of resources. She kept her voice steady and her account factual, unwilling to resort to tears or manipulation. When she finished, Killian was quiet, his expression unreadable. "These men who claim your uncle owed them money," he said finally. "Give me their names." She did, and she saw something flash in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or contempt. "They're lying about the amounts. I knew your uncle slightly. He was an honest man. Those three are known troublemakers who work the edges of the law. They see an opportunity to exploit a vulnerable young woman." He stood, and Natalie's hope plummeted, thinking he was dismissing her. But he said, "Wait here." He disappeared into the general store. Natalie sat in an agony of suspense, watching people pass on the street, wondering what was happening. 15 minutes later, Killian emerged with a small leather pouch. He handed it to her. Inside were gold and silver coins. "There's $100 there," he said. "More than enough to cover whatever your uncle actually owed, plus your boarding house fees and some extra to live on while you find work." Natalie stared at the pouch, stunned. "I cannot accept this. I have no way to repay you." "I didn't offer it as a loan." "Then why? You don't even know me." Killian resettled his hat, looking out at the dusty street rather than at her. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be alone and desperate in a hard place. Consider it a gift." Something in his voice suggested old pain, carefully buried. Natalie's throat tightened with emotion. "I cannot simply take such a sum. Please, there must be something I can do. I can work. I can keep house, cook, manage accounts. I'm educated and capable. I don't need help at the ranch. Then let me work off the debt some other way. Please, I cannot accept charity of this magnitude." Killian turned back to her, and for the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across his stern features. "You're remarkably stubborn. I'm remarkably desperate, and I have my pride, what little remains of it." He considered her for another long moment. "I have a proposal, though you're free to refuse. My ranch house needs a woman's touch. I've been living like a bachelor for too long. The place is clean enough but spare. No curtains, no decent cooking, no organization to speak of. You could come work as my housekeeper. Room and board provided, plus a small salary. The work would be hard, and the ranch is isolated about 10 miles from town. You'd be the only woman there, aside from when the cook's wife visits sometimes. But you'd be safe and fed, and you'd earn honest wages." It was more than Natalie had dared hope for. A job, shelter, safety, but propriety nagged at her. "Would that be appropriate, me living at your ranch? I have a foreman and 4 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. You'd have your own room in the main house with a lock on the door. I give you my word that you'd be treated with complete respect, but I understand if the arrangement makes you uncomfortable." Natalie weighed her options. Stay in town, vulnerable to Latimer and the men demanding payment, scraping by on the $100 until it ran out. Or go to the ranch, work honestly, and build some stability. When she looked at Killian's face, she saw no deception, no hidden agenda. Just a straightforward offer from a man who seemed to mean what he said. "I accept," she said, "and thank you. You've quite literally saved my life." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the state of my kitchen." It was a joke, dry and unexpected, and it startled a genuine laugh from Natalie. Some of the tension between them eased. "First, we need to deal with those men," Killian said. "Come with me." He led her down the street to the saloon where the men typically gathered. Natalie's anxiety spiked, but Killian's steady presence beside her was oddly reassuring. They found the 3 men playing cards in a dim corner. When they saw Killian, their expressions shifted from bravado to wariness. Killian dropped several coins on the table with a sharp clink. "Sam Dawson owed you $15 combined, not 70. That covers it plus interest. Miss Dawson's debts are now settled and she's under my protection. If any of you approach her again with threats or demands, you'll answer to me. Are we clear? The men glanced at each other. The largest one, who had grabbed Natalie's arm, started to protest. Now see here, Quad. She's got no proof what Sam owed. And you have no proof of your inflated claims. But I know Sam was settling his accounts before he died. I helped him with the math myself. So you'll take what I'm offering and be grateful, or we can take this to the sheriff and let him sort through Sam's records. Your choice. The threat hung in the air. Everyone knew that scrutiny of their business dealings would reveal far worse than exaggerated debts. The man who had done the talking grabbed the coins. Fine, we're square. Good. And the word square means you never bother Miss Dawson again. If I hear otherwise, there will be consequences. Killian guided Natalie out of the saloon before the men could respond. Once outside, she released a breath she had not realized she was holding. You just made enemies for my sake. Those men were already enemies to anyone decent. Don't worry about them. They're cowards who only prey on the vulnerable. Now, do you have belongings to collect? Yes, at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. Get your things. I'll settle your account there and meet you out front with the wagon. An hour later, Natalie's small trunk and carpet bag were loaded into a sturdy wagon. She had said goodbye to Martha, who hugged her tightly and made her promise to visit when she came to town. Killian helped Natalie onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they left Casa Grande behind, heading into the vast open landscape of the Gila River Valley, Natalie felt as though she was traveling to another world. The desert stretched in all directions, broken by distant mountains and scattered vegetation. The late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber. It's beautiful, she said softly. It's harsh, Killian replied. But yes, it has its beauty. You'll need to be careful at the ranch. There are rattlesnakes, scorpions, and the heat can be dangerous if you're not used to it. Don't wander off alone until you know the area. I understand. I'm a quick learner. You'll need to be. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clop of hooves. Natalie studied Killian from the corner of her eye. His hands on the reins were strong and capable, his profile stern but not unkind. She realized she knew almost nothing about this man who had so dramatically altered her fate. "May I ask you something?" she ventured. "You can ask. I may not answer. Why did you really help me?" The truth, not the polite explanation. Killian was quiet for so long that Natalie thought he would not respond. Finally, he said, 7 years ago, I came to this territory with nothing. I'd lost my family's ranch in Texas to debts after my father died. I was 23, angry and desperate. A rancher named George Quinn gave me work when no one else would. He taught me everything about running a successful operation in this climate. When he died, he left me his ranch, the Running Q. He had no children, and I think he saw something in me worth investing in. I've spent 7 years building on what he started, and I've done well. But I never forgot what it felt like to have nothing, to be at the mercy of strangers. When I saw you today, I saw myself at 23. The difference was, no one was threatening to sell me to a saloon owner. You had it worse. The honesty of his answer moved Natalie deeply. Thank you for telling me, and I'm sorry about your family's ranch. It was a long time ago. I've built something better here. The Running Q. You named it after George Quinn. He named it years before I arrived. I just kept the name. As the sun began to set, the ranch came into view. It was larger than Natalie had expected. A sprawling operation with a substantial main house, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals containing horses and cattle. The main house was adobe and wood, built to withstand the harsh climate, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Killian pulled the wagon up to the front and helped Natalie down. Ranch hands emerged from the barn, eyeing her with open curiosity. Killian introduced them briefly. His foreman was a weathered man in his 50s named Tom Brennan. The other hands were younger, ranging from early 20s to mid-30s. All of them were polite but reserved. "Miss Dawson is my new housekeeper," Killian announced. "She's to be treated with the same respect you'd show your own sisters. Any man who forgets that will be looking for work elsewhere." "Understood," a chorus of "Yes, sir," and "Understood, boss" followed. Killian carried Natalie's trunk into the house and showed her to a bedroom on the ground floor. It was simple but comfortable, with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand, and, as promised, a sturdy lock on the door. A window looked out over the desert, currently painted in purples and oranges by the setting sun. "Get settled," Killian said. "There's a bathing room through that door. Water has to be heated and carried, but you're welcome to it. I'll have some supper sent over from the bunkhouse. The cook there is decent, but starting tomorrow, kitchen duties fall to you if you're willing. More than willing. It's what you're paying me for. I'll pay you $15 a month plus room and board. If that seems unfair, say so." It was more than generous. "That's very fair, thank you." He nodded and left her alone. Natalie sat on the bed, running her hands over the clean quilt. Less than 12 hours ago, she had been facing threats and destitution. Now she had safety, employment, and a stern but honorable man who had asked for nothing in return except honest work. She unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her 2 dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the dresser. A photograph of her parents, a book of poetry, a silver hairbrush that had been her mother's. Such small things to represent a whole life left behind. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Killian holding a tray with a plate of food and a cup of water. Tom's wife usually helps with the cooking when she visits, but she's in town this week. "This is what the men are eating, beef stew and cornbread. It's edible." Natalie took the tray, touched by the gesture. "It smells wonderful, thank you. Tomorrow I'll show you the kitchen and the rest of the house. For tonight, just rest. It's been a difficult few days for you. Mr. Quade, I want you to know how grateful I am." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "Call me Killian. We're going to be living under the same roof. Formality seems excessive. Then you should call me Natalie. Natalie." He said her name carefully as though testing how it felt. "Rest well." Morning comes early on a ranch. After he left, Natalie ate the stew, which was better than he had suggested, and prepared for bed. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive. Her mind kept replaying the day's events, kept circling back to Killian's face when he had handed her that pouch of coins, when he had confronted those men on her behalf, when he had told her about losing his family's ranch. She had expected the West to be full of rough, hard men with little kindness to spare. Killian was certainly rough and hard, shaped by years of brutal work and harsh conditions. But there was kindness in him too, buried deep but real. She found herself wanting to know more about him, to understand what lay beneath that stern exterior. These thoughts troubled her. She had no business being curious about her employer beyond the bounds of their professional relationship. She was here to work, to earn her keep, to build a new life. Romance and attraction had no place in that plan. But as she finally drifted to sleep, her last thoughts were of pale blue eyes and strong, capable hands, and a voice that had said her name like it mattered. Morning arrived with a knock on her door and Killian's voice calling that breakfast was in an hour. Natalie dressed quickly in her work dress and apron, pinned her hair up securely, and emerged to explore the house by daylight. The main room was large and sparsely furnished, just as Killian had described. A worn sofa and 2 chairs sat near a fireplace. A dining table with 6 chairs occupied one end. Everything was clean but austere, lacking any personal touches or comfort. The kitchen was better equipped than she had expected, with a good stove, plenty of pots and pans, and a larder stocked with basics. Killian appeared as she was examining the supplies. "What do you think?" "I think I can work with this. Do you have chickens for eggs?" "A small coop out back." "Collect what you need. There's a smokehouse with bacon and ham, and Tom can bring you beef or game as needed. Flour, cornmeal, beans, and other staples are all in the larder. We get supplies from town monthly." "What do you normally eat for breakfast?" "Whatever's quick. Eggs, bacon, cornbread left from the night before." "I can do better than that. Give me an hour." Natalie threw herself into cooking with a focus that surprised her. She made fluffy biscuits, scrambled eggs with wild onions she found hanging in the larder, thick slices of bacon, and strong coffee. When she called Killian to the table, he stared at the spread with something approaching wonder. "When did you do all this?" "It's just breakfast. Nothing fancy." He sat and took his first bite of biscuit, and Natalie felt absurdly pleased when his eyes closed briefly in appreciation. "This is about 100 times better than anything I've eaten in months. Then my employment is already justified." They ate together, an oddly domestic scene that made Natalie hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. Killian ate with the efficient focus of a man used to fueling his body for hard work, but he complimented her cooking twice more before finishing. "I need to ride out to check the north pasture today," he said. "Tom will be around if you need anything. Feel free to explore the house and make whatever changes you think necessary. I meant what I said about the place needing a woman's touch. You have fabric for curtains, and is there a sewing machine?" "There's fabric in one of the storage rooms, left from when George's wife was alive. She died long before I arrived, but he never could bring himself to get rid of her things. You're welcome to use whatever you find. As for a sewing machine, I think there's one somewhere. I'll have Tom help you locate it." After Killian left, Natalie spent the morning exploring. She found the storage room packed with carefully preserved items. Bolts of fabric, some faded but still usable. A good sewing machine in working order. Dishes and linens, curtains and quilts. It was like discovering treasure. Over the following weeks, Natalie transformed the ranch house. She made curtains for every window, softening the harsh light and adding color. She rearranged furniture to create more comfortable spaces. She cooked meals that had Killian and the ranch hands praising her name. She organized the kitchen, the larder, the linen closets. She planted herbs near the kitchen door and flowers along the porch. Killian watched these changes with an expression Natalie could not quite read. Sometimes she caught him standing in the doorway, just looking at the main room with its new curtains and the small touches she had added. A tablecloth, a vase with wildflowers, books arranged on shelves. He never said much, but she sensed his approval. Their relationship settled into an easy routine. Natalie rose early to make breakfast. Killian ate, discussed any needs for the day, and headed out to work the ranch. Natalie spent her days cooking, cleaning, mending, and managing the household. In the evenings, after supper, they often sat on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the desert in brilliant colors. These evening conversations became Natalie's favorite part of the day. Killian was not a talkative man by nature, but he opened up gradually. He told her about the ranch, about the challenges of raising cattle in the desert, about his plans to expand into horse breeding. She told him about her life in St. Louis, her parents, her education, her dreams of becoming a teacher before circumstances had destroyed that possibility. "You still could," Killian said one evening. "Become a teacher, I mean. Casa Grande will need a school eventually as more families settle. Maybe someday. For now, I'm content where I am. It was true. Despite the hard work and isolation, Natalie found herself happier than she had been in years. There was satisfaction in cooking a good meal, in seeing the house become a real home, in the simple rhythms of ranch life. And there was Killian himself, a constant, steady presence that she had come to rely on more than was probably wise. She was falling for him. The realization crept up on her over those weeks, undeniable and terrifying. It was in the way her heart lifted when she heard his footsteps on the porch. In how she found herself watching for his smile, rare but devastating when it appeared. In the warmth that flooded her when he complimented her cooking, or thanked her for some small improvement to the house. But Natalie kept these feelings locked away. Killian had hired her as a housekeeper, nothing more. He treated her with unfailing respect and kindness, but he had given no indication that he saw her as anything beyond an employee. She told herself to be grateful for what she had and not to wish for more. 2 months after her arrival, Killian needed to make the monthly supply run to Casa Grande and asked if Natalie wanted to come along. She eagerly agreed, looking forward to seeing Martha and getting a change of scenery. The trip to town was pleasant, filled with easy conversation. They arrived mid-morning and split up to handle different errands. Natalie visited the general store where Martha greeted her with delight. "Look at you. You've got color in your cheeks and you've put on some healthy weight. Ranch life agrees with you." "It does. I'm very happy there." Martha's eyes twinkled knowingly. "And how is Mr. Quade treating you, with complete propriety and respect?" "That's not quite what I asked, but I'll let it pass. The whole town's been talking, you know." Killian Quade, the most confirmed bachelor in the territory, suddenly hiring a pretty young housekeeper. There's been quite a bit of speculation. Natalie felt her cheeks heat. "There's nothing to speculate about. I work for him, that's all." "If you say so, dear." "But I've known Killian since he arrived in this territory, and I've never seen him hire household help before. He's always been content to live rough. Makes a person wonder what changed." Before Natalie could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they saw a crowd gathering in the street. Natalie's stomach dropped when she recognized Victor Latimer at the center of it, and he was talking to Killian. She hurried outside, arriving in time to hear Latimer say, "I'm just saying, Quade, it's interesting that you take in a woman with such questionable circumstances. Her uncle's debts, her sudden appearance in town with no resources. Some might think she's paying you back in ways that have nothing to do with housekeeping." The insult hung in the air like poison. Natalie saw Killian's expression turn to stone, saw his hands curl into fists. Before he could respond, she stepped forward. "Mr. Latimer, you know nothing about my circumstances or my arrangement with Mr. Quade. I'd thank you to keep your vile insinuations to yourself." Latimer's smile was oily and unpleasant. "Touched a nerve, did I? I'm just making conversation, Miss Dawson." "No need to get defensive unless there's something to be defensive about. The only thing offensive here is your presence and your baseless slander." Natalie was shaking with anger, but she kept her voice steady. "Mr. Quade gave me honest employment when I needed it, and I've worked hard to earn my keep. If you have a problem with that, it speaks to your character, not ours." Several townspeople murmured agreement. Latimer's expression soured. Before he could retort, Killian stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Natalie. "This conversation is over, Latimer. You've said your piece and Miss Dawson has responded with more grace than you deserve. Now step aside before I forget we're on a public street." The threat in Killian's voice was unmistakable. Latimer was a schemer, not a fighter. He raised his hands in mock surrender. "No need for threats. I'm just looking out for the town's moral standards." Your concern for morality is touching, coming from a man who runs a crooked gambling operation and exploits desperate women, Killian said coldly. Now get out of my way. Latimer stepped aside, but his parting look at Natalie was full of malice. The crowd dispersed, and Killian guided Natalie back toward the wagon with a gentle hand on her elbow. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine. I'm sorry you had to deal with that because of me. You have nothing to apologize for. Latimer's been looking for a way to take a shot at me for years. He's angry because I won't do business with him, and I've convinced others to do the same. He's trying to cause trouble, but he won't succeed." But the encounter had shaken Natalie. As they loaded supplies into the wagon, she could not shake the feeling of eyes watching, of whispers following her. She had been naive to think that living at Killian's ranch would not generate gossip. On the ride home, she was unusually quiet. Killian noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "What Latimer said," he began, then paused. "It bothers you. Of course it bothers me. He basically called me a prostitute in front of half the town. Anyone with sense knows better. You've done nothing wrong. But the doubt is there now. People will wonder. It will affect your reputation." "I don't give a damn about my reputation, and neither should you." "Easy for you to say. You're an established rancher, a man. These things roll off you like water. For a woman, reputation is everything." Killian was quiet for a moment, the reins loose in his hands as the horses plodded steadily homeward. "Then maybe we should give them something real to talk about." Natalie's heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" He pulled the wagon to a stop, there in the middle of the empty road with nothing around them but desert and sky. When he turned to face her, his expression was more open than she had ever seen it, vulnerable in a way that made her breath catch. "I mean that I've been trying to convince myself that hiring you was purely practical, that I was just helping someone in need. But the truth is, from the moment you sat down on that bench and looked me straight in the eye and asked for help, you've been under my skin. These past 2 months, watching you turn that empty house into a home, sitting with you on the porch at sunset, listening to you laugh, eating food you cooked with your own hands, it's been the best time I've had since I came to this territory. Maybe the best time I've ever had." Natalie could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Killian, let me finish. I told you when you arrived that I was giving you that money as a gift, not a loan. That was true. But there was something else I said, or almost said. When you insisted on working off the debt, part of me wanted to say yes for purely selfish reasons. I wanted you at the ranch. I wanted to see you every day. I wanted the chance to know you, to see if what I felt in those first moments was real or just loneliness talking." "And what did you discover?" Natalie whispered. "That it's real. That I care for you more than I should, given our arrangement. That I lie awake at night thinking about you just down the hall, wishing things were different. But I also know I have no right to put this on you. You came to me desperate and vulnerable. I gave you a job, but the power dynamic is still unequal. If you want to keep things as they are, professionally distant, I'll respect that. I'll never mention this again." Natalie's heart was racing. All the feelings she had been suppressing rose to the surface. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day after you gave me the money?" "I said a lot of things. You said, 'Don't thank me yet.' You know what I wanted to say?" He shook his head, his blue eyes intense on hers. "I wanted to say, now I owe you a lifetime, because that's what it felt like. You saved my life, Killian. You gave me back my dignity and my hope. And every day since, I've been trying to figure out how to repay that debt. But the truth is, somewhere along the way it stopped being about debt. I didn't fall for you because I owe you. I fell for you because of who you are, because you're kind and fair and strong, because you make me feel safe and valued, because when you smile, which is rare enough to be precious, it makes my whole day better. Killian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with one calloused hand. "You're sure? This isn't gratitude or obligation, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, soft and careful as though she might break. Natalie leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, became less careful, more urgent. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Killian rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly. Ask your hand in marriage when the time is right. Build a life together if you'll have me." "Yes," Natalie said simply. "To all of it, yes." They sat there in the wagon for a long moment, holding each other, the desert wind warm around them and the future suddenly bright with possibility. When they finally continued home, everything felt different. The air seemed clearer, the colors more vivid. They kept glancing at each other and smiling like fools. By the time they reached the ranch, Natalie's cheeks hurt from grinning. Tom took one look at them and grinned himself. "Well, it's about damn time," he said. "We've been running a betting pool in the bunkhouse on when the boss would finally make his move." Killian glared at him, but there was no heat in it. "You're all fired." "Sure, boss, whatever you say." That evening, after supper, Killian and Natalie sat on the porch as usual, but this time his arm was around her shoulders and she was tucked against his side. It felt natural, like they had been doing it for years. "Tell me about Texas," Natalie said. "About your family." Killian was quiet for a moment, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. "My father was a good man but a poor businessman. He took risks that didn't pay off, borrowed money he couldn't repay. When a drought hit and we lost most of the herd, it was the final blow. He died of a heart attack and my mother followed 6 months later. I think she died of grief more than anything. I tried to save the ranch, but I was 23 and overwhelmed. The creditors took everything. I drifted for a while, did ranch work wherever I could find it, until I ended up in Arizona and met George Quinn. He sounds like he was a good man. The best. He gave me a second chance and taught me how to do it right this time, how to manage money, plan for droughts, diversify. Everything I am now, I owe to him. He'd be proud of what you've built. I hope so." Killian pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "What about you? What would your parents think of all this?" Natalie considered. "My mother would have liked you. She always said character mattered more than wealth or status. My father would have grilled you mercilessly, but he would have respected your honesty and work ethic. They both would have wanted me to be happy, and I am. For the first time since they died, I'm truly happy." Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. Killian was true to his word about courting her properly. He brought her wildflowers from the desert. He took her riding, teaching her about the land and the ranch. He talked about his dreams for the future, and those dreams now included her. Natalie continued her work as housekeeper, but the dynamic had shifted. They were partners now, building a life together. She took more interest in the ranch operations, learning about the cattle and horses. Killian encouraged her ideas and valued her opinions. 3 months after their conversation on the road, Killian rode into Casa Grande and returned with a small velvet box. That evening, he went down on one knee on the porch where they had spent so many evenings talking. "Natalie Dawson, you came into my life when I didn't even know I needed someone. You've made my house a home and given me a future worth looking forward to. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The ring was simple but beautiful, a gold band with a small diamond. Natalie looked at Killian's earnest face, at the hope and love in his blue eyes, and felt her heart overflow. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both grinning, Natalie laughed. "What?" Killian asked. "I was just thinking about what you said that first day, about the debt." "What about it? You paid my debts and now I owe you a lifetime. Turns out you were more right than you knew." Killian smiled, one of those rare, full smiles that transformed his whole face. "Works both ways. You paid your debt the moment you agreed to stay. Everything after this is just two people choosing each other. Then I choose you. Every day I choose you. And I choose you." They were married a month later in a small ceremony in Casa Grande. Martha Cunningham stood up for Natalie, and Tom Brennan stood up for Killian. The whole town turned out, even some who had gossiped when Natalie first moved to the ranch. Seeing her and Killian together, the obvious love between them, silenced most of the remaining whispers. Victor Latimer did not attend, which suited everyone just fine. The wedding breakfast was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food prepared by half the women in town. It was a joyful celebration filled with music and laughter. As Natalie danced with her new husband, she looked around at the ranch that had become her home, at the people who had become her friends and family, and felt blessed beyond measure. That night in the bedroom they now shared, Killian held her close and whispered, "No regrets, not a single one. You. Only that I didn't find you sooner." Their first year of marriage was blissful. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Killian expanded the horse breeding operation, and Natalie proved to have a good eye for quality stock. They worked together, planned together, dreamed together. When Natalie discovered she was expecting a child, Killian's joy was so intense it brought tears to her eyes. He became even more protective, insisting she not overwork herself, hiring a girl from town to help with the heavier household tasks. Their son was born in the spring of 1880, during a rainstorm that broke a long drought. They named him Samuel George Quade, after Natalie's uncle and Killian's mentor. He was a healthy, loud baby who had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. Killian was a devoted father, often found holding Samuel late at night when the baby was fussy, walking the floor and singing old cowboy songs in his deep voice. Watching her stern, stoic husband turn to mush over their son made Natalie fall in love with him all over again. When Samuel was 2, a daughter joined the family, a delicate girl they named Rose. She had Natalie's blonde hair and Killian's serious expression, though she smiled more readily than her father ever had. The ranch continued to grow. Killian's reputation for honesty and quality stock spread throughout the territory. Buyers came from as far as California and Texas to purchase running Q horses. The original ranch house was expanded to accommodate the growing family, with more bedrooms added and a larger kitchen. Natalie's dream of teaching found expression in a different way. As Casa Grande grew, she started a small school on the ranch for the children of the ranch hands and neighboring families. Killian built her a one-room schoolhouse near the main house, and Natalie spent her mornings teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic to a dozen eager students. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching Samuel and Rose play in the yard, Killian pulled Natalie close. "Do you remember that day in town when you asked me for help? Every detail. It changed my whole life. Mine too. I thought I had everything figured out, a successful ranch, a simple life. I didn't realize how empty it all was until you showed up. You brought color and warmth and love into my world. You gave me a family and a future." "We gave each other those things," Natalie corrected gently. "I was drowning when I met you. You threw me a lifeline, but I had to choose to grab it. We both took a chance on each other." Best gamble I ever made. They watched their children play, the desert sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Samuel was chasing his sister, both of them laughing. The sound of their joy carried on the warm evening air. You think they understand how lucky they are. Natalie wondered. Growing up here with all this space and freedom, with parents who love them, they will eventually when they are older. For now, let them just be children. A few years later, in 1885, Casa Grande incorporated as an official town. Killian was elected to the town council, a position he accepted reluctantly but fulfilled conscientiously. Natalie's school had grown enough to warrant a larger building in town, and the territory sent an official teacher. Natalie was offered the position and accepted, though she limited her hours to accommodate her growing family. A third child, another boy they named Thomas after Killian's faithful foreman, was born that same year. The Quade family was well known throughout the territory, respected for their integrity and generosity. When a severe drought hit in 1887, Killian used his resources to help struggling neighboring ranchers, providing water access and fair prices for their desperate cattle sales. Several families survived that hard year because of his intervention. Natalie organized relief efforts in town, collecting food and supplies for those hit hardest. "You're too generous," Natalie told him one evening, reviewing the accounts. "We've given away thousands of dollars. We can afford it, and I remember what it was like to lose everything. If I can prevent that for others, I will." It was one of the many reasons Natalie loved him. For all his stern exterior, Killian had a deeply compassionate heart, especially for those facing the kind of desperation he had once known. As the years passed, the Quade children grew. Samuel showed a natural talent for horse training, spending hours in the corrals working with the young stock. Rose inherited her mother's love of learning and her father's business sense, keeping meticulous records of ranch operations from the time she was 10. Thomas was the wild one, adventurous and fearless, giving his parents more than a few gray hairs with his exploits. In 1890, on a warm summer evening, Killian and Natalie celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Their children, now old enough to understand the occasion's importance, had planned a surprise party with help from Tom and the other ranch hands. The main house was decorated with wildflowers and ribbons, and a feast was laid out on long tables in the yard. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Killian stood to make a toast. Samuel, now 10, stood beside him with a serious expression. Rose and Thomas sat with Natalie, all eyes on their father. "10 years ago," Killian began, his voice carrying easily in the quiet evening air, "I married the most remarkable woman I've ever known. She came into my life carrying debts that weren't hers to bear, and I paid them thinking I was doing a simple act of kindness. But Natalie turned that transaction into something infinitely more valuable. She gave me a home, a family, and a love I never knew I was missing. She taught me that the best investments aren't in land or cattle, but in people and relationships." He turned to Natalie, his blue eyes warm. "You've given me everything, and all I gave you was $100 and a job offer. I definitely got the better end of that deal." Natalie laughed through tears. "You gave me a life, Killian. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love and a family and a purpose. That's worth more than all the gold in California." Samuel stepped forward, holding a small wrapped package. "We got you something, Mama and Papa. All of us together." Natalie unwrapped it to find a beautiful photograph frame containing a family portrait they had taken in town the previous month. But what made it special was the inscription engraved on the frame. "The Quade family, built on love and second chances." Both Killian and Natalie were too moved to speak for a moment. Finally, Killian cleared his throat roughly and pulled all 3 children into a hug, Natalie joining to make it a family embrace. The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and stories. The ranch hands shared tales of Killian's early days, making the children howl with laughter at stories of their dignified father making rookie mistakes. Martha Cunningham, now a cherished family friend, regaled everyone with the story of how Natalie had arrived in town and how the whole town had watched the romance develop. As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Killian and Natalie found themselves alone on the porch once more, in the spot where they had spent so many evenings falling in love. "You ever think about how different life could have been?" Natalie asked, nestled against Killian's side. "If my uncle hadn't died, if I'd found work in town, if you'd said no when I asked for help. Sometimes. But I don't dwell on it. We're here now, and that's what matters. I used to think about debt in terms of money owed, but the debt between us was never really about money, was it?" Killian considered this. No, it was about one person helping another at a crucial moment, about trust and hope. You trusted me enough to come to this isolated ranch with a man you barely knew. I trusted you enough to let you into my life and my home. That kind of trust, that's the real currency. And now we're not creditor and debtor, we're partners, equal investors in this life we've built. Natalie smiled. "I like that, partners. Though if we're being technical," Killian said with a rare flash of humor, "you've more than paid off your original debt. I think you're now officially overpaid. Overpaid for getting to spend my life with you, raising our children on this beautiful ranch, being part of this community. I don't think that's possible. Then we're both overpaid, both incredibly fortunate." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. The desert night was alive with sounds, crickets and distant coyotes, the soft movement of horses in the corrals, the whisper of wind through the sage. Inside the house, they could hear their children preparing for bed, Samuel's voice patient as he helped Thomas with something, Rose singing softly to herself. These sounds of family, of home, of life fully lived, were the sweetest music. As the years continued to pass, the Quad Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the territory. When Arizona became a state in 1912, Killian and Natalie were among those who attended the ceremonies, representing their county with pride. Their children grew into capable, compassionate adults. Samuel took over the day-to-day ranch operations, married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and gave Killian and Natalie their first grandchildren. Rose became a teacher like her mother, eventually running the expanded Casa Grande school system. Thomas, after years of wandering and adventure, settled down to become the town's sheriff, using his intimate knowledge of the territory's wild places to keep the peace. Killian and Natalie aged gracefully together, their love deepening with each passing year. They remained active in the ranch and community, though they gradually stepped back to let the younger generation take the lead. They spent their days working in the garden Natalie had expanded over the years, riding through the desert they both loved, and spoiling their growing number of grandchildren. On their 25th anniversary in 1905, the whole town of Casa Grande threw them a celebration. The Quads had become legendary, a love story people told to illustrate that good things could come from the hardest circumstances. During the speeches and toasts, Tom Brennan, now in his 80s but still sharp as ever, stood to speak. "I've known Killian since he was a young man learning the ranching business from George Quinn. He was always good at the work, but there was a loneliness in him back then, a sense of something missing. Then one day he came back from town with a young woman who looked scared but determined, and I thought, this is going to be interesting. I had no idea just how interesting it would be." Laughter rippled through the crowd, But what I watched over the years wasn't just a romance. It was two people who should never have met, who came from completely different worlds, choosing each other every single day. Through droughts and prosperity, through challenges and joys, they built something lasting. They showed all of us what real partnership looks like. The Running Q isn't just a successful ranch. It's a testament to what happens when two people commit to building a life together, when they turn individual struggles into shared strength. He raised his glass. To Killian and Natalie Quade, may we all be so lucky in love. The toast was echoed by hundreds of voices. Natalie, now 47 years old with silver threading through her blonde hair, looked at Killian, now 55 with more gray than brown in his hair but still strong and vital. The years had weathered them both, but they had weathered together, growing stronger rather than weaker. That night back at the ranch, they walked through the house that had evolved so much since Natalie's first day. The rooms were filled with photographs, paintings, and mementos of a life richly lived. Evidence of children and grandchildren was everywhere. Toys left on windowsills, small jackets hung on hooks, crayon drawings displayed with pride. They ended up on the porch, drawn as always to that spot where so much of their relationship had unfolded. 25 years, Natalie mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we've been together forever. Both, I think. Time's a strange thing. Do you remember what you said to me in the wagon that day? When you finally told me how you felt? I said a lot of things. Which part? You said I'd been under your skin from the moment we met, that watching me make the house a home was the best time you'd had since coming to the territory. Still true. More true now than then, even. Natalie reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. I never properly answered what you said about owing a lifetime. You didn't need to. You've been answering it every day for 25 years. I want to say it anyway. You paid my debts that day in Casa Grande. You said I owed you nothing, but I disagreed then, and I disagree now. I do owe you a lifetime, Killian, but not as payment or obligation. I owe you a lifetime of partnership, of love, of choosing you every single day the way you've chosen me. And I pay that debt joyfully, knowing it's one I'll never fully settle because it renews itself every morning when I wake up beside you. Killian's eyes were suspiciously bright. He pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion he had shown as a younger man, proving that some things only improve with time. I love you, he said simply. I loved you when you were a desperate young woman asking for help. I loved you when you were my brave housekeeper, transforming my empty house. I loved you when you became my wife, when you gave me children, when you stood beside me through every challenge. And I'll love you until I draw my last breath and beyond if God allows it. And I love you. My rescuer, my partner, my home. They stood together on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, the desert night peaceful around them. The journey that had begun with a debt and a desperate plea had transformed into something neither could have imagined. A love story for the ages, built on the foundation of one person's compassion and another's courage. The years continued their steady march. Killian and Natalie celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1910, their 35th in 1915. They welcomed more grandchildren, saw their children thrive, watched Casa Grande transform from a rough frontier town into a proper city. Through it all, they remained devoted to each other and to the ranch that had brought them together. The Running Q continued to prosper under Samuel's management, with Killian and Thomas often consulting but trusting the younger generation to lead. In 1920, on a warm spring evening, Killian and Natalie sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Killian was 72, Natalie was 64. Age had slowed them both, but their minds remained sharp and their love undiminished. "You know what today is?" Natalie asked. "Tuesday," she laughed, the sound still musical even with age. "Yes, but it's also the anniversary of the day I arrived in Casa Grande. 42 years ago today, I stepped off that stagecoach with $7 and a heart full of fear." Killian reached for her hand, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their decades together. "Best day of my life, even though I didn't meet you until the next day. 42 years. We've been together longer than we were alive before we met. Hard to remember what life was like without you." "Empty," Natalie said. "That's what it was like, empty and just going through motions." "You gave me purpose, Killian. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything. That's the beauty of it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the desert in colors they had seen thousands of times but never tired of. The ranch stretched around them, prosperous and peaceful. Their children were settled and happy. Their grandchildren, now numbering 9, were growing into fine young people. The life they had built together was strong and would continue long after they were gone. No regrets. Killian asked, echoing a question he had asked on their wedding night 40 years earlier. "Not a single one," Natalie answered as she had then. "You. Only that I have to choose between living without you someday or leaving you to live without me, but that's the price of loving deeply. Then we'll pay it when we must and be grateful for every day until then." Killian pulled her closer, and they watched the stars emerge, the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their love story and would shine on long after its end. But for now, in this moment, they were together, still choosing each other, still paying the beautiful debt of a lifetime of love. Their story continued for several more precious years. Killian passed away in his sleep in 1923 at the age of 75, with Natalie holding his hand. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched over the decades. Natalie, heartbroken but composed, spoke at the service about the man who had saved her life, and then spent decades making that life worth living. She lived 4 more years without him, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her dearly. She continued to teach part-time and remained active in the community, but everyone could see that part of her had gone with Killian. The light in her eyes was dimmer, the ready smile less frequent. On a spring morning in 1927, Natalie passed away peacefully at the age of 71. Her last words, spoken to Rose who sat beside her bed, were about Killian. "Tell your father I'm coming home. Tell him I paid my debt in full, and now I'm collecting what he owes me." A lifetime together, even if that lifetime continues beyond this world. They buried her next to Killian in the family plot on a hill overlooking the Running Q Ranch, the land they had loved and nurtured together. On their shared headstone, placed there by their children, was a simple inscription: Killian Quade 1848-1923 and Natalie Quade 1856-1927. 2 lives joined by chance, bound by choice, united by love, partners for a lifetime and beyond. The Running Q continued to thrive under Samuel's stewardship and later under his children's management. The house Natalie had transformed remained a family home for generations, with each new addition honoring her memory by maintaining the warmth and welcome she had created. The people of Casa Grande never forgot the story of how Killian Quade had rescued a desperate young woman, and how that act of compassion had blossomed into one of the territory's great love stories. Parents told it to their children as an example of how kindness creates ripples that extend far beyond the initial act. Young couples invoked the Quade's names when making their own wedding vows, aspiring to build the kind of partnership that had defined Killian and Natalie's marriage. In the dusty archives of Casa Grande's Historical Society, letters between Killian and Natalie were preserved, offering future generations a window into their relationship. In one letter, written by Natalie during a rare trip to visit Rose when she was teaching in Tucson, she wrote, "My dearest Killian, I have been gone only 3 days and already I miss you terribly. How did I ever survive 22 years without you? I think of that frightened girl who arrived here with nothing, and I can hardly recognize her in who I am now. You changed everything for me, not just by paying those debts, but by seeing value in me when I saw none in myself. You gave me a lifetime of love, and I have tried every day to give you the same in return. I will be home soon, back to our porch and our sunsets and our life together. Wait for me. All my love always, Natalie." Killian's response, carefully preserved in the same archive, read, "My beloved Natalie, the house is empty without you. I never realized how much life you brought to these walls until you were gone. Tom says I am grumpier than usual, and the men are giving me a wide berth. I told him that's what happens when a man's better half is away. You say I changed everything for you, but you transformed my world just as completely. I was existing before you came, not living. Now I cannot imagine going back to that half-life. Come home soon. The sunsets are not the same without you beside me. Yours always, Killian." These letters and dozens like them became treasured pieces of Casa Grande history, proof that even in the harsh frontier of the American West, love could flourish and transform lives. The little schoolhouse where Natalie had first taught was eventually relocated to the Casa Grande Museum, preserved as a testament to her dedication to education. Inside, carefully maintained, was the desk where she had taught countless children to read and write, where she had nurtured minds and encouraged dreams. The Quade family continued to be pillars of the Arizona community for generations. Samuel's children and grandchildren maintained the running queue as one of the state's most respected ranches. Rose's descendants became educators and community leaders throughout the Southwest. Thomas's line produced several law enforcement officers who served with distinction. But perhaps the most enduring legacy was not in the land or the buildings, or even the descendants. It was in the story itself, the reminder that sometimes our darkest moments lead to our greatest blessings, that kindness creates chains of positive events that extend far beyond our knowing, and that true love, the kind that chooses commitment every single day, can transform 2 individual lives into something greater than the sum of its parts. On the 100th anniversary of Natalie's arrival in Casa Grande in 1978, the town held a special commemoration. Quade descendants from across the country gathered to celebrate their ancestors' legacy. The mayor gave a speech about how Killian and Natalie's story embodied the best of the American West: the courage to start over, the compassion to help those in need, and the strength to build lasting institutions. A great-great-granddaughter of Killian and Natalie, herself named Natalie in honor of her ancestor, spoke to the crowd. "Our family has been blessed beyond measure, and it all traces back to one moment of compassion on a dusty street in 1878. My great-great-grandfather saw someone in need and chose to help. My great-great-grandmother accepted that help with courage and dignity. From that simple transaction grew a love that sustained them through decades, a family that has now spread across this nation, and a legacy of compassion and integrity that continues to guide us. We honor them today not just as our ancestors, but as examples of the best humanity can be." The Running Q Ranch, though no longer owned by the Quade family, having been sold in 1965, was designated a historical landmark. The main house was preserved as it had been during Killian and Natalie's time, allowing visitors to walk through the rooms where their love story had unfolded, to stand on the porch where they had spent countless evenings talking and dreaming. In the main room, carefully displayed in a climate-controlled case, was the original pouch Killian had given Natalie that first day, the one containing $100 that had changed both their lives. Next to it was a handwritten note in Natalie's elegant script. This pouch contained $100. Killian gave it to me thinking it was payment for debts. It was actually a down payment on a lifetime of love. I kept it all these years as a reminder that the most valuable things we can give each other are not money or possessions, but hope, trust, and the chance to become more than we ever could alone. May whoever reads this remember that kindness is never wasted, and love is always worth the risk. Natalie Dawson Quade, 1920. The story of Killian and Natalie Quade lived on, passed down through generations, adapted into local folklore, and eventually researched by historians fascinated by this testament to love in the Old West. Books were written, documentaries were filmed, and couples getting married in Casa Grande often visited the Quade gravesite to leave flowers and make their own promises of lifelong partnership. The desert that had witnessed their first meeting, their courtship, their marriage, and their entire life together continued its eternal cycle, unchanging yet ever-changing. The Gila River still flowed through the valley. The mountains still stood sentinel over the land. The sunset still painted the sky in brilliant colors. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, perhaps Killian and Natalie still sat together, watching those sunsets, their hands intertwined, their love undiminished by time or death. Two souls who had met by chance, connected by need, and chosen each other every day for a lifetime and beyond. Their story was a reminder that debts come in many forms, that sometimes what we owe each other cannot be measured in dollars and cents, but only in loyalty, love, and the daily choice to build a life together. It proved that from the hardest circumstances can come the greatest blessings, that one act of kindness can change the trajectory of multiple lives, and that true love, the kind built on respect, partnership, and unwavering commitment, is the most valuable currency of all. In the end, Killian Quade paid $100 and received a lifetime of love. Natalie Dawson accepted that payment and gave a lifetime of devotion in return. They both paid their debts in full and found themselves infinitely richer for the transaction. Their love story became legend, but the truth behind the legend was simple and beautiful. Two people who needed each other found each other, chose each other, and built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And that, ultimately, was the real treasure. Not the successful ranch, not the children and grandchildren, not even the legendary love story itself, but the daily choice they made, year after year, to honor the promise they had made to each other, to be partners in all things, to support each other through hardship and celebrate together in triumph, to build something lasting from the broken pieces of their individual pasts. They arrived as strangers, one desperate and one lonely. They left as soulmates, their lives so intertwined that separating them would be impossible. And in the space between arrival and departure, they created something beautiful, a love that transformed not just themselves but everyone they touched, rippling outward through time to inspire generations yet unborn. The debt was paid. The lifetime was lived. The love was real. And in the quiet desert nights, when the wind whispers through the sage and the stars shine bright overhead, some say you can still feel their presence, still sense the power of a love that refused to be diminished by death, a partnership that transcended the boundaries of a single lifetime to become something eternal. This was their story, a story of debt and redemption, of desperation and hope, of two broken people who found wholeness in each other. A story that began with a simple transaction and evolved into one of the great love stories of the American West. A story that proved, beyond any doubt, that the best things in life cannot be bought or sold, only freely given and gratefully received. And so the story ended where it began, in Casa Grande, Arizona, where a frightened young woman once stepped off a stagecoach carrying debts she could not pay, and where a lonely rancher made a choice that would define both their lives. The town grew and changed, the landscape evolved, but the memory remained, preserved in letters and photographs, in family stories and historical records, and most of all, in the hearts of those who understood that true love is the greatest debt of all, one that can only be paid through a lifetime of devotion, freely given and joyfully received.